All right, let's get right to it. Andrew, Chantal, and Bruce, they're all in Ottawa today for the pomp and pageantry. You just know they all must love a parade. Okay, this was all supposed to be about a reset. Was it actually a reset there, Andrew?
I couldn't see it, no. I mean, this was more like a greatest hits parade. They were reciting all of the things that would be pleasing to their base. You know, things like getting rid of the long gun registry, getting rid of the wheat board monopoly, these kinds of things. A little bit of firming up on the fiscal conservative side, a promise of a spending freeze and balanced budget legislation. But I think this was mostly just trying to shore up support among the base because, after all, they've got a convention coming up at the end of the month, but very little in the way of reaching out or broadening the base.
No big new ideas, Chantal?
Well, if someone was pushing reset, there were no batteries in that control because it just stayed on the same channel. Yeah, I agree with Andrew. It sounded like a repeat of everything we knew, and I kind of wondered why we are having a throne speech, because when you look at it, whatever was new in there could have been handled possibly better by a ministerial statement saying, oh, I have this new policy idea today. It's not major, it's not central, but I'd like to help you guys pay a bit less or have more choice with cable. Well, that does not a throne speech make.
Bruce, where are you on that?
Well, I generally agree. I think it was a pretty listless effort in terms of trying to reimagine the government. I think the government is clearly trying to find a way to both stay in touch with its base and maybe try to reach some new voters in the center. But it's a signal that the government doesn't seem to think that it's in much trouble, at least at this point, because if they did think that they were, then this speech isn't really the kind of thing that's going to get them out of that corner.
This is the kind of thing you bring in if you're 20 points ahead. You know, they took an extra month off. Remember, that was part of the reason for the prorogation was they had these big plans in mind. Well, it didn't seem to add up to much.
Well, the other thing is it didn't play, I thought, to the Prime Minister's strength, which most voters still identify him with the economy. But for that to work, it would have had to be a lot more focused. And this kind of went in every direction. At worst, it was a shopping list, and at best, it was a repeat.
I was talking to a former senior Conservative this evening, and I said, what do you think of that speech? And this person said, what that speech told me is they're missing Nigel Wright. You know,
that's possible.
Yeah.
Well, it could be just a lack of ideas or direction. It may also be that they don't think they need to do that much, that the Liberal lead isn't real, that when we get into the actual choice of the election 2 years from now, if they can go in front of the people and say we've got balanced budgets and free trade deals and unemployment down near 6%, and oh, by the way, we've got some tax cuts for you, the calculation may be that there'll be enough voters for whom the economy is the number one thing, who will kind of hold their nose and stick with the Tories and stick with the devil they know.
Let me pick up on Bruce's point, and you can expand on it, Bruce, here, suggesting that they're, and we've kind of heard this over the last couple of months, that they might be trying to move to the center as governments often do in a run-up to an election. Was there really a move to the center here?
There was a toe put in the water of the center. I don't think there was really anything more than that. And I think if you look at the measures that are meant to kind of light up the consumer and make them smile and see a lot of upside for themselves, some of them are really kind of hard to imagine a Conservative government putting into action. I know that they're saying that they want pick and pay in TV. But they haven't really defined how that market's going to work. Is it going to be a free-for-all, in which case there are going to be some consequences that are going to be hard for them to manage down the road? Maybe even more problematic, when they talk about closing the price gap between goods and services sold in Canada versus in the United States, that sounds an awful lot like a government intervening to control prices in the market. At least until they dispel that fear, they're going to have their base wondering whether this is really a good idea. They're going to have business against them. And if at the end of the day they can't deliver the benefits that they're promising to consumers on promises like that, then I think they're going to be left vulnerable to criticism from the other two parties for sure.
You want to pick up on that, Chantal?
Well, it seems that they open more can of worms than they probably should have on those scores. It also seems like they have done this throne speech without much of a notion of who the people are that they need to win back. They have lost almost 1 in 4 voters that supported them in 2011. And there didn't seem to be any thought as to why these people left and why they would come back. And the answer to why they would come back, I don't think was in the throne speech and those consumers' measures, because I don't think they are ballot box issues.
Andrew?
Well, there was an opportunity, if they really meant it on the consumer first agenda, to do something quite radical, but also I think what a lot of experts would applaud, which is, because people have been practically begging them to do it, is open up the wireless market, open up the airline market, open up the financial services market to foreign competition. That would really serve consumers, as opposed to what they seem to want to do, which is to be seen to be doing things for consumers. Have these long laundry list of little micro things that they can be the big brother helping the consumer out. I agree with Bruce. This business of trying to equalize prices between Canada and the United States is absolutely cockamamie. The only reason there is that gap right now is because of the high dollar. It's absolutely hostage to whatever the exchange rate is. So supposing they did equalize the prices on Monday and the exchange rate went up on the Tuesday, they'd be out of whack again. It's unworkable if they mean anything by it.
You know, the wild card in today may well have been the trade deal with the EU. It's not like we didn't know this was coming, or at least the negotiations were underway. I think it's probably fair to say that the average Canadian wasn't like following this like we've watched the past trade deals. And it's unclear at this point, until we actually see what's in the deal, the impact that it's going to have, that it could have. Could this be the major player out of today, the trade deal?
Well, it's certainly a winner for a government to conclude a trade deal, but don't expect a replay of the 1988 free trade election over it, in the sense that I don't think that the Liberals are going to oppose this, and I don't think that Thomas Mulcair, if he can help it, will oppose it. And once that happens, it becomes something that happened that everybody agrees with. I'm not so sure that once you're into, a general agreement on that this is a good thing, you're going to get a lot of points out of it in the ballot box.
I think it's potentially very big. We'll have to see, as you say, what the deal is, if it's actually a comprehensive trade deal, not something minor, but it looks like it's going to be something pretty big. And it's big not only in itself, but it may hold the key to unlocking some of these other negotiations with they're having with all manner of countries, because oftentimes you're hesitant to make a concession in one until you've figured out what you're doing in another set of negotiations. If they can, if they can go to the people 2 years from now with not only this agreement, but some others, that is big, and we should give them credit for that.
I'm not sure that that this is the same as other trade deals, other major trade deals anyway, in the sense that unlike the Canada-U.S. Free Trade Agreement and NAFTA, in those situations there was an army of business voices and economists who were talking to Canadians for months, in fact in some cases I guess you could say years, about the upsides for Canada, the ways that we were going to win by entering into these new trade agreements. There really hasn't been very much of that, about that so far, and I think it's in parts because the government wasn't sure that it was going to be able to conclude a deal. But now what we're going to hear about is a little bit about the potential wins, I think, but we're also going to hear from dairy farmers and others in Canada who are worried about some negative consequences that could happen too. So I think it may be a good policy for the government, and I think most Canadians will probably say better to have more of these kinds of deals than not, but the enthusiasm for it may not be all that large.
You know, the three of you were all in Ottawa today, not just to hear what was in the speech, you could have read that from anywhere, but to also kind of watch the theater surrounding it and understand the politics around it. Of what you witnessed today, what struck you most? What was the most important thing you saw, or the strangest thing you saw? What's the takeaway, Chantal?
So I'm going to say something that's off the throne speech and sounds very strange, but I watched with bemusement the fight that the Prime Minister and the caucus picked with the media by excluding them from covering a prime ministerial speech that was supposed to be open. And I deduced from that the new communications team would not set out to do that on its own, and that this came right from the top. And for me it said, and it goes back to your Nigel Wright missing in action statement, that at this point Stephen Harper has become his only advisor.
Andrew?
I thought the most interesting thing was the contrast, if you will, between the first part of the speech, which was, I thought, was written by the Governor General himself or people around him, and the rest of it, which was obviously the government's agenda. And I may have been the only one who thought this, but I thought it was almost an implicit rebuke to the government's style of governing. It was a lot of things about we're not self-satisfied, we're Canadians, we're not overbearing, we're caring. It was a different tone than the rest of the speech, I thought quite remarkably so.
Bruce?
Well, I guess I agree with Chantal that the idea of picking a fight with the media yet again is another example of the government being unable to get out of its own way in terms of delivering important messages. But I was also struck by the fact that of the thousands of words in this speech, I didn't see the word accountability there. If it was there in a very minor way. And when you think about where this government has come from, and of course the last 6 to 12 months that it's lived through, you would think that accountability is going to be a bigger part of the discussion that they're going to be having with Canadians in the coming months than was evident in that document.
You know, the picking the fight with the media is, they obviously knew this was coming. They've already got out a fundraising letter tonight on it, trying to raise money from the base.
Yeah, but they are...
Well, let me finish. But the media, you know, ignoring the Prime Minister's speech this morning, conveniently forgetting that they'd barred reporters from going to the speech. They were only letting cameras in there, so it was kind of odd. But go ahead.
But they're at 30%. They need to make new friends. And this goes, I don't know how you make friends, Peter, but I wouldn't go that way about it.
All right.
Well, not only do they need to make new friends, but the Liberals, I think, are going to go very hard after these center-right, economics-minded voters, and that is territory the Tories have to hold on to.
Okay, I want to get to that in our last couple of minutes. What does the opposition do with this today? You know, we watched both Mulcair and Trudeau and their statements, but how do they move forward from this day? Bruce?
Well, I think probably the smartest thing politically for them to do is not to spend very much time at all talking about this throne speech, at least until some more details emerge and they have threads that they can pull on. In the meantime, I think that they'd be perfectly legitimate in choosing to go back to the questions about the Prime Minister and Nigel Wright and Mike Duffy. I expect that that's what they're going to do. They've been signaling that through the course of today. And I think it's a legitimate set of questions to continue to raise.
Andrew?
I agree. I mean, if this was an attempt to change the channel, it didn't work. And I agree with that these are legitimate questions that have not begun to be answered, and we're certainly going to be hearing more and more things coming out of the various police investigations, et cetera. I think we're headed back in that direction.
Chantal?
I don't disagree, but I also think that there are strengths in what the directions of the governments are, and I think on those, the opposition should also make sure that it says it can do better.
Yeah, I wonder how long the NDP line of you've stolen all our ideas. These are our ideas that you've gone with. That doesn't. How long does that play for? Or does it play at all?
It hardly ever matters. Although I do think that there's some legitimate question that will be in the minds of the public about if you're looking for a consumer advocate, does Stephen Harper look like Ralph Nader? Is he that kind of politician in Canada? And I think most Canadians will think maybe not. He's going to have to be a little bit more personally full-throated about his commitment to regulating prices and markets in defense of consumers, I think, in order to land that effectively.
All right, got to leave it at that. Good discussion. Thank you all. Enjoy Ottawa. Nightlife in the nation's capital is always fun. Thank you, Bruce, Chantal, and Andrew.